What if I told you that Odin and Thor, the most famous gods of Norse mythology, were not the most terrifying? That beyond their thunder and wisdom lurked others, gods and beings so dark, so unstoppable, that even the gods themselves feared them. These forgotten figures shaped the Viking imagination, embodying death, fire, vengeance, and decay. Their stories were whispered at the edges of firelight, not celebrated in songs. Today, we uncover the 5 forgotten Norse gods and monsters darker than Ragnarok itself. From the frozen lands of the north came gods of thunder, wisdom, and war. But beyond the well-known figures like Odin, Thor, and Loki, there were others, darker, stranger, and far more dangerous. These forgotten gods of Norse mythology embodied chaos, death, vengeance, and the unstoppable forces of nature. Their stories were not sung as often in mead halls, but they shaped the myths that terrified Viking-age Scandinavia. Their names were whispered in sagas, etched into the bones of fate, and feared in the shadows. To the Vikings, they were not merely characters in a story. They were forces that haunted the edges of existence. To speak of them was to speak of the inevitable. And now, their stories return. Far below the roots of Yggdrasil, the great world tree, lay a realm colder and darker than any battlefield. It was Niflheim, the land of mist, frost, and silence. And here ruled a goddess whose very name struck fear into mortal hearts. Hel. She was the daughter of Loki, born of the giantess Angrboda, and like her siblings, the serpent Jormungandr and the wolf Fenrir, her existence was a threat to the world of gods and men. The sagas tell us that her appearance was half living and half dead. One side of her face glowed with the pale color of flesh, while the other side was blackened and rotting like a corpse left in the snow. Odin, recognizing the danger she posed, cast her into Niflheim, giving her dominion over those who died not in glory but in weakness, the sick, the old, and the forgotten. To the Vikings, this was perhaps the cruelest fate of all. A warrior who fell in battle could expect to feast in Valhalla or dwell in Folkvangr with the goddess Freya. But those who died quietly, far from the clash of steel, would descend into Hel's cold embrace. Her hall, Eljudnir, was said to be vast and terrible, with walls made of serpents and gates that moaned like the dying. Her very bed was called illness, and her table was called hunger. But Hel was not content with ruling the forgotten dead. Her power lay in the growing armies of souls who flowed into her realm every day. And in the prophecy of Ragnarok, it was said that when the world tree trembled, Hel would open her gates and unleash her legions of the dead. They would march across the frost, led by her monstrous kin, to bring ruin to the living and even to the gods themselves. Hel was not a goddess of mercy, she was inevitability. She reminded the Vikings that even glory was rare, and that most of humanity would end in her cold grasp. If Hel embodied inevitability in death, another figure embodied inevitability in vengeance. Vidar, the silent god, son of Odin and the giantess Grid, was known as the Avenger. Unlike Thor, who roared with thunder, or Loki, who deceived with words, Vidar's power was silence. He was rarely mentioned in the sagas, but his destiny was etched into the end of all things. Vidar was said to be immensely strong, second only to Thor himself. But he was patient, calculating, and quiet, waiting for the moment when his strength would be most needed. That moment would come at Ragnarok, when Fenrir, the monstrous wolf, breaks free of his chains and devours Odin, king of the gods. The sagas tell us that when Odin falls, Vidar steps forward without a word. He wears upon his foot a great iron shoe, crafted from all the discarded scraps of leather ever cut by mortal shoemakers. With this strange weapon, he plants his foot on Fenrir's lower jaw, seizing the wolf's mouth. Then, with hands of unbreakable strength, Vidar tears Fenrir apart, avenging his father in grim silence. The Vikings feared chaos, but they also feared vengeance. Vidar's presence in their mythology was a reminder that silence does not mean weakness. It can mean waiting, watching, and striking only when the time is right. To them, Vidar was inevitability given form, the avenger who waited until the final moment only to unleash destruction when it was most needed. But if Vidar was the silent god of vengeance, then Angrboda was the mother of monsters. Her name meant the one who brings grief, and grief was all she gave to the world. She lived in the Ironwood, a dark and haunted forest on the edges of the known world. She was a giantess, one of the Jotnar, and with Loki, she bore 3 children who would shake the foundations of creation itself. Her first was Fenrir, the wolf destined to devour Odin. Her second was Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent cast into the sea, so vast it encircled the world. And her third was Hel, the goddess of the underworld. Each of these children was so dangerous that the gods tried to destroy them. Yet each survived, and each would return to play their part in Ragnarok. The sagas speak of Angrboda raising entire packs of wolves in the Ironwood, sending them to spread terror across Midgard. She was not simply the mother of monsters. She was the mother of chaos itself, a reminder that some creations are born only to destroy. Unlike Frigg or Freya, who embodied love and fertility, Angrboda embodied the shadow of motherhood, a womb that birthed doom. To the Vikings, her presence was a warning. Creation can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. Even love, even birth, can lead to monsters. And from her bloodline came the very forces that would one day bring the gods to ruin. But if Angrboda brought grief, then Surtr brought fire. He was no god of men, but a fire giant, older than the gods themselves. Surtr lived in Muspelheim, the realm of fire, guarding its borders with a flaming sword brighter than the sun. His name meant black, or the swarthy one, and though he is not often spoken of in stories of the gods, he plays one of the most important roles in the final destruction of the 9 realms. At Ragnarok, when the sky splits and chaos consumes the world, Surtr leads his army of fire giants across the Rainbow Bridge. The bridge shatters under their weight, and they march into the world of men and gods. With his flaming sword, Surtr sets the cosmos ablaze. Not even Asgard, the home of the gods, survives his fire. The 9 realms burn, the seas boil, and the stars themselves vanish in smoke. The Vikings understood fire. They feared it and they worshipped it, for fire could give life in the cold, or it could destroy entire villages. Surtr was the embodiment of fire's ultimate face, not a hearth to warm, but a flame to consume everything. To them, he was not a mere enemy, but the very destiny of the universe, that all things end, not in ice, but in fire. And then, in the deepest roots of Yggdrasil, in the shadows that no fire could touch, there was Nidhogg. This was no god of thunder or wisdom, no warrior of honor or glory. Nidhogg was the dragon serpent, the corpse eater, who fed upon the dead and gnawed at the roots of the world tree itself. Yggdrasil was the axis of the cosmos, holding together the 9 realms. But even this mighty tree was not safe. Nidhogg gnawed endlessly at its roots, a slow erosion, a constant corruption that could never be stopped. He was described as feasting on corpses in the realm of Nastrond, the shore of corpses, where venom dripped from serpents and rivers of poison flowed. The sagas say that in Ragnarok, when the worlds collapse, Nidhogg rises from the depths, carrying corpses in his wings, feasting on the dead as the tree falls. He was not chaos like Loki, nor vengeance like Vidar, nor flame like Surtr. He was decay itself. To the Vikings, he was the darkest truth of all, that even the strongest foundations rot away. Even the roots of creation can be chewed into nothing. The Vikings saw their gods not as eternal and untouchable, but as doomed and fragile. Odin could be devoured. Thor could fall. The world itself could burn or collapse into darkness, and beneath it all, beings like Hel, Vidar, Angerboda, Surtr, and Nidhogg waited, embodying the truths too dark for feast halls and songs. They were reminders that death is certain, that vengeance is patient, that creation can bring destruction, that fire consumes all, and that decay cannot be stopped. These were the forgotten gods and monsters darker than Ragnarok itself. History isn't just in the past, it's alive in the stories we choose to remember. If you enjoyed this journey into forgotten Norse mythology, hit the like button, leave a comment with the legend you'd want to see next, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter of the past.